fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in today on this very special day. It's winter solstice, a monumentally important day in many, many ways. For me, as I always say, for me, it is the yearly rebirthing of the Christ consciousness within us, if we choose it, of course. And I couldn't think of a better day to speak about this Christ consciousness and consciousness in general, which I believe to be the most important subject today on earth today. And who better to discuss it with than with our dear friends, Jeff Stegman and Clayten Stedmann from FLFE. Thank you so much for joining us again today, Jeff and Clayten.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Good to see you, John.
It's wonderful to see you both. We just in the green room, in the proverbial green room, in a digital green room, we just talked about this journey that we all had this year, and what all has happened. And it's truly my deeply held belief that consciousness, as I just said, is at the center, at the it's the foundation of it all. And I think this hasn't been really clearly discussed in a public arena. You two have dedicated your lives to this subject, the subject of consciousness, raising consciousness, and how it affects the whole everything. So I know you had some specific things you wanted to discuss today. So I'm giving either one of you the stage to dive into the fields of consciousness a little deeper, how they affect us, not just locally, but over time, all over Earth. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'll jump in. Our podcast, aptly titled Fields of Consciousness, we discuss this a lot. And Dr. David Hawkins has been such a great teacher with his book, Power versus Force, and all of his other books that really show us that everything has consciousness and that we're constantly interacting with fields of consciousness all around us, everywhere we go, from other people, from places. And that's the leap that many people may not think of, is a place holds consciousness from what has happened there. And those consciousness fields, we may talk about it like, oh, the energy doesn't feel good here, or the energy feels great here. But really, we're interacting with those fields all the time. And there's thoughts and emotions and uplifting or depressing energies that we may think it's us. We may think that's my thought or that's my emotion, but it may not be. It may be from a field of consciousness around us. So I think it's a really important thing to know and be aware of, so that we're interacting in a sovereign way with what's around us and not just accepting it as my thought when it's not.
That's an interesting observation. So, for example, if I were to purchase a new home, right, and we new to us, but it was a home that was already lived in before, and so all of a sudden we move into this home, and certain maybe unusual things to our family start to happen, whether we get into fights a lot or accidents happen or whatever. What could that be in that field, and how would we find out whether it's us or actually coming from that field? How do you distinguish that?
Well, I know how we distinguish it is we use kinesiology to measure the influence. What you can do is you can do a thought audit on yourself. You can ask yourself, is that thought a loving thought? Is that thought going to bring me closer to my family, closer to my true self, closer to the world, closer to my human family? And if we can get still enough to actually ask those type of questions, that again brings us back into that sovereign position where we are co-creating the world with the divine instead of being at the effect of the world and the ego machinations that continue to go on in the world.
So is it another way of saying we step out of the feedback loop where certain ideas, concepts are projected into the field, and when they're strong enough, they create the field or they infuse the field, and when we're in it and we don't really pay attention, we just pick up what is there rather than tune in with our own true spirit? Is that the feedback loop that has kept us in war and conflict and all those things over such a long time? Is that another way of looking at it?
Yeah, let me give you an example from a customer. Because, yeah, I believe you're right that we're interacting with these fields all the time, and it's almost like a conversation. And it's, in meditation, we learn to watch our thoughts. In certain types of meditation, a thought may come, and you're observing it as a distant observer. It's not you. And it's much the same here. We're talking about thoughts that are coming from outside us. But we had a customer that had listened to our podcast and been on the service, and they were hiking out in the woods, and place they'd never been, and they decided to go off trail to find something to eat, to get a break from the hike. So they come out of the woods, and they're on a highway, and there's a big billboard. They see the back of it behind them, and they start talking about French fries. It's like, wow, where can we get some French fries? I really want some French fries. They were like obsessed with French fries. So they start walking down the road, and they look back, and the billboard is French fry. It's a large French fry picture, right? So there was a field of French fry like desire around this billboard. And it was just the constant, driving by of people seeing the billboard, I want French fries. And it created like a French fry desire in this field of consciousness around the billboard. So that's an example of an influence that's not your thought, that is affecting you. And if you hadn't seen the billboard, they'd probably just gone down the road and gotten French fries, maybe supersize, right? But that wouldn't have been their normal mode, but they were affected by that field. So that's an example.
I mean, on the one hand, depending on how you look at it, that can be a very powerful and positive thing, or that can be a very, very detrimental and negative thing, right? Because everything that is amplified at that level has huge influence on people. And we see this, of course, in symbology. When spiritual religious symbols are used positively, they are infused with a certain level of consciousness, and whoever gets in touch with them or is close to them feels it. But then the opposite is possible too. So you have, in your work and with your service, you have actually dedicated your life and your service to creating that positive and higher field of consciousness. So if we stay with the example of a home, a house, because that's one of the service that you do, a big portion of that service and of your intention is to clear those negative impacting levels or fields of consciousness and ideas, maybe even thought forms that are in that field. How does that work, and what changes when that is cleared?
We're clearing a field from the land or a property is in some ways similar to clearing negativity from ourselves. So when we're making these requests to divinity through the FLFE system, we always write out the context of what we're trying to achieve. So the context is, what is the ultimate environment in a home that supports and enhances the mission? The mission is to support the optimal conditions for the evolution of consciousness in an economized society. Right? That's a society where most of us have to work, or we choose to work. Not everybody needs to work, I guess, but some people do because they like it. So we write out all of the good things we can imagine that would be optimal in a home. So the parents respect each other, the children respect the parents respect the children, to let them be their own autonomous person while guiding them with the wisdom they need to grow. That people are in a good mood, and there's hundreds and hundreds of the best possible intentions you can imagine. You write those all out, and then we write them out in a way that is going to increase the likelihood of them having positive impact. If you don't write them out in a way that increases the likelihood of them having positive impact, your intentions can be good, but not much will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we realized after a while that, like, it used to take the property, the average property on FLFE to go from, let's say the average property was 300 on the Hawkins map of consciousness. We're using the Hawkins map. It would take 3 days to go to 540. And then we were thinking, gosh, there's probably some way to get it to go faster. And then we realized that we had to sort of, like, if you're going to paint the house, you've got to wash the walls down first. Otherwise, you're just painting on top of dirt. Even if it isn't dirty, you're not going to get the same experience if you don't wash the walls and sand it and do your prep, right? So then we realized we needed to look at all the negative conditions that happened. So we made a list of all the negative conditions that could happen on the land. And that was 2 weeks of, like, consciously going into hell for hours at a time making these lists. It was not fun. But we did that, and then we made these requests to divinity, which is the information in the FLFE field, to have those conditions be mitigated or removed. And now the consciousness of the properties goes to, well, we set it at 550 as a default, but it can go there in as little as a few seconds.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and that's the surge oftentimes people feel, right, when that property just really goes up. So to me, that's a principle I've been kind of playing with, and I'm still sort of chewing on the idea of the feedback loop. I know there's some truth to it. I just don't know how high the truth is. And because we measure truth so much, I can get stuck in that, right? It's like, do you need to have the highest truth, or you can just take some truth and keep going? So anyway,
I will let you chew on that, because I see it almost as an echo chamber. Is when you don't have a conscious understanding that there is a field that you're interacting with, you're kind of living on default by the programming that you receive, which most people do, right? There's no conscious thinking of it. So then whatever's there is what you pick up, because there's no discernment, right? Because there's no, we don't know what we don't know, in other words. So, and it's not I don't think it's an intentional thing. It's a subconscious thing that we do.
The French fry example is perfect for that. I mean, they came out of the woods behind that billboard. They had French fry thoughts. That was now added to the field of French fry thoughts around that billboard. So they were adding to it, and like you said, kind of interacting and bouncing it back. So then it became stronger. So the next person that comes along, it's going to be an even stronger thought. Adds energy to the thought, or it adds energy to the field.
One of the things that you two and the whole team at FLFE, I know, are passionate about, it is the individual service to individuals, their homes, their families, but it is also the service at large. With this intention, if we can raise the consciousness of individuals, we can collectively raise the consciousness of the earth and all the regions of the earth. And I know you've done quite a lot of measurements and calibrations around the levels of consciousness in different areas of the world. We talked about that. However, I don't think that there is a general understanding of how that works, how you really do that. I know you say applied kinesiology, but can you go just a little bit deeper into how you can measure something that is invisible and seems immeasurable?
Well, the basic premise of kinesiology, let's say consciousness kinesiology, because we're talking about measuring consciousness, is that we are directly connected to the divine because we are part of the divine. So that's a premise that if you can't get by that one, it's like me trying to figure out the definition of feedback loop, because I know feedback loops is used in music as well. So I'd have to sort that out in my own mind. So the premise is that we're directly connected to the divine, and we're part of the divine, and that the body can respond to truth with strength and with untruth or falsehood with weakness, which it does. And that if you use the mind to form a proper inquiry, which is a positive declarative statement, and because the background of the world is in fact positive, so one of the things that happens when you clear the negativity out is that positivity emerges because the world is inherently positive. And that was the closing thought I wanted to share about properties, is that once we started clearing out the negative, the positive just showed up so much easier. And I think that's maybe a good reflection for this season, because it's really been a time of doing shadow work as we go more into the darkness. The nights are longer, and it is a time to go inward and do that clearing, if you will, I believe. And so kinesiology, the premise is that the universe is positive. We're connected to the divine. You use your mind to create positive declarative statements that are highly specific, and you access the connection to divinity to observe the response of the body and telling you if the statement is true or false. And that's a profession. You can learn a little bit in a weekend to do, like, if you have predetermined declarative statements in a pre-written conscious context, where you'd have to have all your terms and definitions defined. So we use the Oxford Dictionary because it's the highest consciousness dictionary on the planet. It's about mid 400s, 450. So if we were to do, for example, a program or kinesiology on feedback loop, we would have to write down what the definition of feedback loop would be, because there's a definition of feedback loop in the music industry, which I don't know much about. And there's also maybe another definition, and then there's the one you hold, John, right? So there's 3 different truths to that. So when we're doing programs and using kinesiology, if you want to be very specific about it, you just have, it's a fair bit of work to set it up. But once you set it up and you know it's working, you confirm it through just observation and all types of things, then you know you've got something good if your team of kinesiologists is in the right headspace, in the right vibration, the right love, the right state of being ultimately. And Jeff and Ashutosh, our GM, myself, we have a team of kinesiologists. We know how to make the perfect inquiry. We also know that we each have issues with things that we can't test on because we have issues with them, right? So we sort of test each other, and ultimately you do need a team of people around you you need a team of people around you to do kinesiology really well, because we all have stuff that's either, temporary or longer term, and we need to sort of manage around that. So if we're in a team of doing testing, there's a certain amount of variance of truth. So when I sent you some data like last week, there's plus or minus maybe 2 points of accuracy, because, I'm a human, I have a nervous system, I'm on the path like everybody else. So there will be variance. And then when I did a lot of kinesiology research, we had 3 teams of 3 people, 3 triads. We would have a predetermined declarative statement. We would do the inquiry. We take the average, each person would test each other. You have a calibrator, a subject, and an auditor. Auditor audits the process. Calibrator makes the statement. The subject is the neutral. Arm and muscle testing, you use typically an arm. So anyway, there is a lot of rigor to it at some level, and I'm just trying to give you a perspective on, there's a lot of people use kinesiology and they just don't get a lot of accurate results. It takes time.
I mean, we do use it in our lives. For example, if I feel I'm deficient on something, or I'm trying to see if a certain supplement or food is beneficial for my body, then Christine and I will do that and do it together and test it. But you, of course, in your line of work, you've taken us to a whole new level, and you have also gone deep into the historic levels of consciousness of Earth. And that's, to me, a very interesting subject, because we are not that far away from the highest average that you measured. And then we saw, and I talked about this briefly in another live stream, and then we saw, I think, one of the biggest drops in the shortest period of time in that LOC, and now it's on the way up. Can we talk a little bit about the levels of consciousness, the averages of the Earth, and what that means for all of us?
Well, I'll just preface it and then hand it over to Clayton on the chart. It's easy to understand the local fields. You walk into a graveyard, it feels dark and heavy. You go into a cathedral or someplace where there's been prayer and you feel that uplifted feeling. You walk by a French fry billboard, you think of French fries. So those local fields we can understand, but we're also influenced by these larger fields, regional, country, and the entire world. And that's why we set upon this project of measuring the world over a long period of time to really look at what's happened, and those fields on a large scale like that also affect us in the same way that the local fields do. That in a field of, say, anger, we're going to be more prone to anger. We may have more angry thoughts. Anger may come up in ways that we didn't expect. So I'll just kind of set the stage that those global fields affect us as well as the local fields.
I'm feeling a bit self-conscious as I talked for a while there. I can kind of get on I can get pretty deep in the kinesiology zone because I do it, I'm down to 15,000 calibrations a month, but I was doing 20 for a long time, and I did over 30,000 a month for a decade. So it's just when you're in that world all the time, you kind of make it your life, and you can kind of geek out on it. So
I actually love that, Clayton. I think that's what we're here for. We're exploring worlds that we haven't explored before on a larger level. So, geek away.
Well, it's a very small specialty, but it really, someone in FLFE needs to do it well. And Jeff's a good kinesiologist. It's just that I tend to do most of it. I guess I'm a little more wired for that. And plus Jeff is a great business architect, and we need that as well. And I can't do that. So not as well as Jeff can. So we did have some slides, Jeff, that we prepared for today. Do you want to go to the slides, John?
Yeah. Which one do you want first?
Well, why don't I let Jeff talk for a while? And he knows this just as well as I do. And I'll add some stuff, Jeff, if you know.
Yeah, this is a great one to start with. So we went back 5,000 years. So we wanted to really look at, what's happened in the world when you really go back further, and it puts in perspective what's happening today. So really,
I think that's 3,000 years, Jeff. We went back longer, but we only documented 3,000 on this one.
Got it. Okay, great. So you can see that what it's showing is below 100 on the Hawkins map. And what we realized as we did this chart was that there may have been areas of the planet that were higher. There may have been civilizations that were higher. We all have heard about Atlantis and Lemuria, and there may have been others even further back in history than this that were high spots, but the rest of the world was relatively low. So a level of consciousness like this really represents a survival state where it's at a level of energy where it's just there's a lot of survival happening. There's hunting for food and changes in the world that are having to be dealt with, climate changes and other things. But you can see that rising above the 100 level, around the time of Christ's birth. And then there's kind of a steady, uptick there that takes us kind of below 200. And one thing to understand about these scales of consciousness that Dr. David Hawkins developed is that they're sort of hillocks or hills that you go over. And 200 is one of those where it's a major change in the way we think of the world. It's a major like death of old beliefs and a rebirth of new beliefs to kind of crest these areas where at 200 we kind of leave behind this negative view of the world. It's like, I have to fight for my life, and it's me or them, or anger and lust and all these various lower emotions, and move into hope and higher levels, towards love, which is up in 500, and in the 300 and 400s into kind of a scientific materialism where, we kind of find the truths in the world as we can understand them, and start to live by a rule of law in some ways. So that's kind of a little bit of an overview of the map. But you can see we bumped along at 200 or just below 200 for quite some time in history. And then we made a major jump up, and the world went over 200 as a whole. And that was the first time in this history that it had occurred. And going back further, we might find something different. But and that was, what was the date, Clayton? I can hardly read it.
It's 1987. Yeah.
The harmonic convergence.
Yeah, it didn't happen because of it, but it happened at the same time, which is a big. Yeah.
And there may have been a feedback loop happening then. Right.
That last uptick there on the chart, it reminds me of Joe Biden's vote infusion at 4 a.m. in the 2020 election. I'm sorry, I just saw this.
It might have been more of a downward spike.
Yeah, what we saw on the chart.
Yes.
But, can we talk a little bit about 2019? It was a good year, wasn't it?
Do you want to pull up the other chart?
Yes, of course.
Because it really shows that dramatically.
Of course. Here we go.
You want to pick this up, Clayton?
Sure. So yeah, what we've done is we've just because the USA is such a big influence on the planet, and we sort of have the USA. I'm not a United States citizen. I'm up in Canada, so. But the U.S. has the biggest media, so they had the biggest influence on the world in that way. Plus, they're the biggest military power and arguably the biggest economy. I know it's getting close, but so we wanted to do an individual country and then compare it to the world and relate it to some events that happened, so we could understand the effect that events have on the consciousness of the world and the country. And of course, we're part of those influences, right? We talk about the localized French fry influence, and then we have the town, the city, whatever, and then maybe the region and the country and the world. So the United States is, as Jeff was saying earlier, it was up in the 400s. So the 400s are what people would typically call first world countries, right? They have the rule of law, as Jeff said. So in the 400s, we have reason, right? On the Hawkins map of consciousness. 200 is integrity, 300 is willingness. Well, 200 is integrity or courage, 250 is neutral, 300 is willingness, 300, 350, and then 400 is reason, and 500 is lovingness. So reason is rule of law. We develop engineering standards. We have, start to have good roads and infrastructure, like, good sewage systems and electrical grids and all those things, all the things associated with first world countries. So the U.S. was in the 400s, 2019, and the U.S. has been in the 400s for a long time, and most first world countries, sort of have been. And then you see the world, it was like 240 and high 240s in the fall of 2019, and then COVID happened, and we went down as low as 100, which is, 100 is fear, 150 is anger, right? So we went to fear. Now we haven't been down that low since before the Spanish Inquisition, like 600 years ago. So we were there for a month, not only in the U.S., but probably if you looked at most of the countries in the world were probably at 100 or lower in April. It was just a very uncertain time, and there was a lot of media attention on the possibilities of what could happen, all the lockdowns and restriction of travel and freedoms. So, then you can see how it came up as we started to work through the pandemic, and then you see the drop again with the U.S. Capitol event, where the world, stayed higher, but the U.S. was affected, right? The U.S. went to anger. I think people were angry, like, what happened, and we're finding out what happened because there's videotapes of it. But at the time, it was definitely a drop for the U.S. And then
it was a narrative, right, that caused that.
Yes, there's the event, and then there's a story about the event. But the story got out, and that's what happened to the consciousness. And you see it bounce back pretty quick. These higher consciousness countries are very resilient. And then it started going up, and then you see the start of the Ukraine conflict there, and then right down to anger again, which is, if there's ever a word for war, I think anger would be the summary of it. And then, the Gaza attack as well. It brought the world down to 150. So my hope for all this, John, is that, we've seen the history where we've gone up so quickly in the last, since 1987, that there's every stage of consciousness has a lesson associated with it. It's just like when you're in school, you got to pass the test before you graduate to the next grade. And then Hawkins' work, and you need some way to measure consciousness, right? There's other ways, but Hawkins has a good map. At 200, below 200 and above 200, there's a totally different quality of energy. It's like each point up is 10 points, but between 199 and 201, it's almost like maybe the equivalent of 5 or 10 points, maybe more. I don't know how to equate that, but there's definitely a different quality of energy. And at every 50 points in Hawkins' map, there's like another base camp. You imagine you're climbing a large hill or mountain, and it's a long way up. So you have to have base camps. You have to get resupplied, get acclimatized. And the next graduation point or grade level in Hawkins' work from where we were in 2019 on the planet, the next graduation point is over 250. And oftentimes people, we may need to go back and take some of the classes again to learn the lesson, right? So my hope is that we're experiencing a relatively, in the context of the history of the 3,000-year chart that Jeff and I did, and you could do these charts for, millions of years. My hope is that we're having a breakdown, which would be followed by a breakthrough, that we're just here in this place. We'll have to learn a few lessons as a human family. And then we can go to the next level of evolution in our consciousness. I just wanted to end this with at least a hopeful, positive framework.
If I may add an observation looking at this chart, Clayton and Jeffrey, I see periods where, and we don't have related events to every period. You just put some of the markers in there. But if I look specifically at the Gaza attack, which, I would say probably the most associated country with Israel is America. They're the closest, America is the closest Israel ally. It's, if you go to a U.S. Congress, in most every office, you'll see an Israeli flag and an American flag. A lot of our congressmen and senators are dual citizens. So there's a very, very close connection between the two countries. However, what is surprisingly positive to me is the sort of, there is a drop, but the drop isn't as bad as you'd expect it to be, which tells me that there is more resilience today than there was when the Ukraine conflict happened, and way more than there was when COVID happened. At least in my perception, more people probably have more resilience. And are we really, when we talk about consciousness and how we are positively or can positively influence, resilience must be an important subject, isn't it? To stay calm or stay centered and grounded in extraordinary events and times. Can you talk a little bit about that and how this particular incident and the fact that the consciousness level was maintained fairly well will positively influence potential future events? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have an intention which we can state around that a little bit later. yeah, we see the imperative at this time is to be aware of what's happening and not take it inside and not have it take us down in consciousness. And that's resilience. And maybe the way we're talking about it, one aspect of resilience is that our level of consciousness is resilient and it bounces back. And we see these atrocities and we can't help but be affected. And we can hold a greater perspective, a larger perspective of what's happening in the world. And there just seems to be more and more awareness of what's happening, been kind of under the hood, right? The things that have been hidden from us for, thousands, hundreds of years, you could say, are starting to come up. And there's just a lot more awareness of, well, this is a narrative. And it's just one narrative. It's not the truth necessarily. And so as we see all these things happening in the world, it seems that humanity is building a resilience to narratives that are not the truth, but seeing them as just like consciousness fields around us, those thoughts coming in, that we can have our own sovereign awareness of the world and awareness of the narratives that are coming at us, as well as the thoughts and emotions that are coming at us, maybe attached to those, particularly in the news media covering live events or videos of live events. There's an energy with that narrative that can take people down in consciousness. And so the more aware we are, the better.
The reason why I brought up the word resilience is because it's one of the strongest words in my experience of your service of FLFE. It comes up a lot because we've been now on the service since August without interruptions. And what it has, from my own experience, and when I observe my family and especially people that come into the field, and I want to talk about that in a moment, I notice that we have a greater resilience when it comes to, first off, EMF. Like that is a big subject, right? The EMF mitigation. So we stay balanced much better, much easier without as much effort. But also conflict. I mean, we're, in every family there are conflict points or different views, and we notice that is much. It's like the edges are smoother, they're not as sharp anymore, and it's like it's a gentler, all gentler. And I would say we probably started out pretty good already, but it's definitely improved greatly. And one of the things I really saw a huge effect of the FLFE service was my in-laws. Christine's parents are visiting, and Christine's mom has one of those watches that measures certain things, and she can look it up on the app, how many steps, heart rates, deep sleep, all of that. So when she came here, the first few nights, her deep sleep was between 2 hours and 2.5 a night. And she's up to 5.5 hours now. Within a week, she jumped up to 5.5 hours of deep sleep in this field compared to her home, which doesn't have the service yet. So it's an incredible jump up. To me, really, it's much more stable. Everything is much more stable. And that is a great, beautiful, but and subtle in many ways influence that just gently there. If we were to put an FLFE field, we talked about this, an FLFE field on a whole town, let's say 100,000 people, what do you think would happen if consciously 100,000 people would decide to work with this field?
Well, there's been some experiments done with TM, in prayer, directed, or positive energies directed towards a town, and the drop in crime and other statistics that happen there. We're only speculating here.
Sure.
But certainly we have the microcosm of our own lives and the lives of people in the FLFE community who tell us about what happens, especially with kids, especially with teenagers who, their anxiety comes down, their ability to connect with others, maybe increases. So we're seeing those stories often, and you take that to a larger scale where people are more connected with each other. They're less likely to jump into anger and more likely to kind of bounce back. We always think of the high consciousness field as like a trampoline where, we can bounce down, but we tend to be buoyed back up to that love, especially that unconditional love level. And it's pretty hard to hold a grudge when you're in an unconditional love
It is.
zone.
It
It's
really is.
It's like going to grandma's on Thanksgiving where everybody loves each other, and it's been decades and decades of that. I'm not going to hold a grudge, if somebody like spills gravy on the carpet, you just go on, it's part of the unconditional love zone.
Clayten, I've gotten to know you as a spiritual numbers guy, deeply spiritual, but also a numbers guy, and very much into, research and numbers and stats and stuff like that. So I come from the athlete background, and I always have a goal. Like as an athlete, I always had a goal. I wanted to, push better, more weight, which meant more strength, which meant better results on the ski slopes. That's the short version. But I'm sure with the work that you two do and your whole team does, you at least secretly might have a level of consciousness in mind that we could reach by the end of next year and the end of that year and the end of that year. What if we look at the end of this decade, 2030, such an ominous date that's pushed by so many people for so many reasons. But from the LOC, the level of consciousness standpoint, what do you think we can accomplish until the end of the decade as an average level of consciousness on Earth if we all do our work to the best of our abilities?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that in terms of a timeline, and I don't know if we've talked about that very much, Jeff, but I think it would be a good idea for us to hold something in mind.
Well, I'm putting you on the spot here. I know.
That's okay. That's okay. I'd like to see the world go above 250.
Mm-hmm.
That would be that'd be extraordinary. Yeah. And if I don't want to limit people. I don't want to limit things either. But that would be, given what's been going on the last couple of years, that would be that'd be a great place to be in for the family.
Okay. One follow-up question here. If you took the USA as a country with, on average, had a pretty high level of consciousness compared to other places in the world, and I'm sure you have that region that has the average lowest. We don't have to name it, but I know you know it. Mm-hmm. So if we can accomplish and go higher and higher, how directly does it affect the lowest on that chart?
Well, there's a saying in this work that a rising tide floats all ships. And in Dr. Hawkins' work in the back of the first edition of Power versus Force, I think it's page 282, he has a consciousness compensation chart. And I can grab it right here and check, but so it talks about, like, depending on the level of consciousness of the planet, one person at 500 would counterbalance for, say, 750,000 people below 200, right? So we often talk about, if you want to make a difference in the world, you don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be a big influencer. You don't have to have a big YouTube channel or start a company or, start a business and make a lot of money. You just be a loving person. And you're going to counterbalance for hundreds of thousands. And if you get higher than 500, you get to 550 or 560. You can counterbalance for millions of people on the planet and help millions of people just by your presence. And we may not notice it around us where people go into a state of happiness, but there is that connection we have with the rest of the human family. And A loving person makes a difference, even though we may not always know it.
You know, the question so often is when people look at certain very, very concerning events in the world, what can little me do? What can this, you know, and I think you answered it beautifully, that there is an invisible effect that little me has that is quite infinite, really, if we scale it up, right? I mean, the higher we vibrate, the higher we go, the greater our effect naturally is. And there's also an observation in our world is that people usually gravitate towards the highest vibrating being in a room. Like everybody's attracted to that particular person usually, and they can't explain it, but they just want. And likewise, they are you know, kind of like they want to stay away from that person that vibrates the lowest also. So there is this direct effect. Now I want to make one thing clear because people have confused something here. You are not saying that when somebody puts an FLFE service on their home or their business or whatever, that their personal level of consciousness is automatically going up to that level. What you're saying is that you're creating a supportive field, right? That allows them to explore that option in maybe easier and gentler ways. But you are not saying, and nobody's ever claimed, you are raising the consciousness of people, which is impossible for any one person to do without, you know, the participation and free will of another, right?
And that's why we say in our mission, the optimal conditions for the evolution of consciousness. That's really what the FLFE space is about, the environment, the bubble, is to have those conditions be optimal for us to rise. And then it is our choice. And if those lower influences, those historical low events that might have happened in the land where our house is currently are gone, then it just supports us to rise more easily on our own. But it depends on our personal path, what we're doing, and maintaining our state. You know, maintaining a loving state in the world. And that is the challenge of these times, is seeing what's happening in the world and things that are being unveiled, and maintaining a loving state, being at peace with those things. And if everyone in the world was maintaining a loving state and taking action to change the world or create a new world, then that's the world I'd love to see. And I would also mention that the level of consciousness of the planet is cyclical, and we're coming into one of the highest times. So this end of the holiday, the Hanukkah and Christmas, and there's many other traditions that, you know, around today, you know, this time of the darkness increasing and now moving into the light, the solstice and Christmas Day, that's the highest level of consciousness. So Clayton talk about the numbers, but you know, one of the things that we can do as an individual is carry this forward further, you know, carry it into January, carry it into February, that lovingness, giving of ourselves to others, that community and family, that let's keep going, you know, let's continue this and carry it forward.
Make Christmas last all year, right? I mean, that's a lot of people wish for that. Clayton, Jeffrey, I want to open one last subject for this conversation today, which is about the technology itself. And I want to preface it by saying that there has been a lot of discussion around this, the questions. You've been accused of hiding it or it's not really real and all of that. But I want to say one thing from the get-go. There is not a technology that I could think of, and we have to think, you know, of knives knives are a form of technology, and an axe is a form of technology, and then we have today highly modern technology. But there's not a piece of equipment or technology that I could think of that cannot potentially be used for the good and the bad. I haven't found something that couldn't be potentially misused if the intention is negative. And I want to preface it with that statement because I know that is exactly why there is not complete openness and transparency around the technology itself. But would love to hear it in your own words, why this technology cannot be openly just shown to the world and the plans be distributed. There's a specific reason for that. And I really, really respect you deeply for honoring that guidance that you're receiving around this. But please explain it to us like you have to me in private conversations.
Well, our focus is to do what's in the highest and best interest of all creation. That's our prayer, to ask the divine to guide us in that. And we have all of our ways of trying to stay in alignment with that intention. And whenever we use kinesiology or pray about how to steward the technology in terms of sharing it with the world, we just get that, it takes a lot of training to learn how to use it, and to have it be a positive influence takes a fair bit of training, because you have to make these requests to divinity in a really clear way. Otherwise, they're just not that effective. And one of the places I trust between Jeff and I is we've never put a negative thought or a negative intention on in the machine. And we showed you the machine, John, because we got that it was in the best interest to do so, because you're inviting us into your community and to your family as well, personally. And we do show it occasionally, a version of it anyway. It's changed a lot since the picture we showed you. But that's, for people want to know, that's why. And, we've talked to people, and we get lots of people saying, well, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? It's like, well, at the end of every request to divinity and the information, the field that goes into the FLFE environment, we ask that everything is done in the highest and best interest of all creation, on top of all the intentions and measurements and everything we put into it. And all these follow generally accepted spiritual principles. You wouldn't find anything in there that any religious scholar or integrist social scientists or historical spiritual leader would look at that and go, yeah, that's great. If you could have that in the environment, let's ask for that. Sure, that's obvious. So I think it's my piece, Jeff. Is there anything else we should add to that?
No, I think you covered it. I think you covered it well, Clayton. The having multiple machines out into the world that people could do whatever they wanted to do with it is just, from the way we see it, not a good idea at this time on the planet. And as Clayton said, we test using kinesiology and other ways to keep checking what's best for us to do. And doing it in this way where, first of all, it keeps the cost very low. So we have a central system, and people don't have to buy something that they have in their house. They don't have that upfront cost. They just have this low monthly expense. There's the benefit of that as well. But that's not the main reason why we don't show it. It's because of this issue, that there are some pieces of the technology that are different, that haven't been done in this way.
But there are some elements of it in this technology that have been used, or maybe used by others for not the highest good of all. And we see this. There are many military-grade weapons that some form of that technology has application in the civilian world. Whether what we use, and we use it potentially or mostly for our good, and they use it mostly for someone's to hurt somebody or to disable somebody. So I wanted to bring this topic up because our conversations have helped me to see this, that it isn't always wise to simply put something out into the open. Likewise, I have speculated, in my own mind, whether the almost unhindered access to any and all spiritual information that's been accumulated over millennia and millennia in the last years has sometimes caused some negative things too, because all this knowledge can be used against people as well. So we have to be very responsible, and the more we know, the more responsible I think we have to be. So Inspired Tribe, I can just tell you that Christine and I have had many conversations with Clayten and Jeffrey, really like never before. I want to say we probably spend more than 24 hours on the Zoom calls, just talking and getting to know each other, and we've met in person. It's one of those rare occasions where I can say I'm 100% and without any reservations. We are recommending, the FLFE service, and mainly because of the integrity of the people that are involved in it. That's really the main reason why we absolutely recommend that you give yourself this Christmas gift of giving yourself that free trial, and that there's absolutely nothing that we see as any red flag or have seen in our journey. And we can only say that it is definitely going to be the best Christmas gift you give yourself this year if you choose to start that free trial that they offer. There's no cost associated, and guess what? You don't even need to type in your credit card, so you won't be accidentally charged during the holidays or anything like that. It's done with full integrity throughout the whole process by the whole team. And from Christine and I and our whole family, we want to thank you for your service. I believe it's one of the most important services in the world today.
Thank you. Yeah, we just took one step at a time. These 10 years we've been in business together, and the years before that we worked, and it's very humbling and gratifying to have your comments and your goodwill towards us, and in your recognition of what we're doing, because we've been in the background and just doing good and doing the best we can as humans and stewards of this technology.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like asking people, well, how do you know that there isn't a version of this technology that's been used on humanity long before you've been born and been suppressing our evolution? And how do we know that there aren't a lot of people out there right now that are using this technology or this type of technology to, accelerate negativity in certain conditions? And, you don't, to change the darkness, you bring more light to it. You don't attack the darkness, right? There's a whole premise with using this type of power that if you want to change, I mean, we're all about, trying to help conditions. Right now, we've got 2 wars on the planet, and we're doing, 95% of the energy that comes from 95% right now. Sometimes it's 98. There's been a few times and it's as low as 90, but at least 95% of the energy today that's going out of the technology is done in service work. We're not getting paid for it. Nobody knows most of it, but we don't attack any place. We just try to create the optimal conditions for the reality of life to emerge, which is life is a positive. It's a positive phenomenon. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. And the background behind all of the chaos that we see, including our own mind, and is light. So, sometimes when you're doing light work, you get attacked. I noticed in the comments, some people are saying, oh, they've seen some reviews about us. And we for some reason, people are making stuff up, and exaggerating things and being malicious. And hey, we're human, that's for sure. But, don't necessarily believe everything that someone goes online and types, like try the service, have your own experience, and trust yourself. But, not every comment on the internet is from the person, is even, if you can have 10 comments from one person, and if that person has an issue with thinking that there is a God, or thinking that there's no absolute truth in the world, there's no divinity, and you keep talking about divinity, and I don't like it, so I'm going to pretend to be 10 different people and slander you. Well, that's the internet.
Yeah, well, it was, there's a guy apparently crucified not too long ago. And that was before the internet. So I think it's, at least we think, yeah. Here's the thing. I will say that, for me, I got pretty thick skin, but there's other members of our family that we shield for that particular reason because they don't have that thick skin, and not everybody has to have it. But I will say that our community, to a very, very, very large extent,
Yes.
has sent us so many beautiful comments and emails about their experience with the service.
I just wanted to say that in this chat today, I at least read 20 beautiful comments about FLFE.
Yeah. So this is the majority.
Beautiful stories
Yes.
you share, and I'm super happy.
I just want to say, because it's, how can I put this? When you know something, and then you test that knowledge and put it to the test, and you realize that there is something here that is absolutely for the highest good of all. Now you have that inner drive to let people know about it. If you're not certain, you don't have that, right? If you're not sure, you don't have that. But when you are sure, you just want to tell everybody about it, right? And you just want to let people know there is something that can be of great support to you. And it's not the miracle thing. It's not some crazy, 24/7 TV advertisement that will promise you everything you ever wanted. No, but it is the greatest, most beautiful support system that you could have in these times to better yourself, to become the best possible version, to raise your consciousness, to do better in the fields you want to do better. And it is simply a little easier to forgive when somebody needs forgiveness, or to be gentler when you could be harsh. Man, I couldn't think of a reason why you wouldn't want that in your life. So what we encourage you to do in Inspired Tribe is two things. Number one, always learn more. And they have a website. We put the link in the description here, where you can learn and learn and learn for all of the holidays, because there's so much there. Research, testimonials, stats, everything you want, videos. And the second thing is, take the offer. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. No credit card. Just give yourself the gift of the trial and see what happens. That's all. Those are the two things we wish for you this beautiful solstice and Christmas season. And Jeffrey and Clayton, thank you once again for sharing, for being here, for being who you are. And we're just very, very grateful to have been reunited in 2023.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here with you and your community. It's been wonderful for our team to meet your community, and there's so many new relationships and conversations that are just bursting with hope and love, and a new world emerging.
Yeah, your community has uplifted our whole office, John. The people that call in are very, I don't think we've had a bad experience with anybody. Everybody's been very kind and easy to deal with, and it's been a joy to be in relationship with the people that you've got around you. So whatever you're doing, it seems to be working.
Well, we're both humbled and very, very grateful for our beautiful community that we've been with them now, and they've been with us for the last 4 years very intensely. And I think even if sometimes you can't measure that, we've accomplished a lot together, and we've done a lot together, and we truly are a family, a tribe, a clan, if you want, and that shows. So we're also very, very proud to be a part of that family, and to be a small part in people's lives, as I know you are too, through what you do. So again, thank you, gentlemen. Merry Christmas to you and your families. A beautiful downtime, hopefully. And to you, Inspired Tribe, we love you. so much, and we appreciate you so much. We're wishing you Merry Christmas. And if that's not how you celebrate this time of the year, we're just wishing you a beautiful time and joy and love and harmony. And we'll see you all very, very soon.